every second that we have invested in this organization, we have been given back in one way or the other, multiple times over.
Welcome to the Louisiana Farm Bureau Podcast. I'm Allie Shipley, and we are so excited to continue our celebration of National Women's History Month and highlighting some of the amazing women in Louisiana agriculture and all they've done for the industry and for the Louisiana Farm Bureau Federation. Today we are in Evangeline Parish, Ville Platte to be specific, and we are at the home of Raquel Manuel, who is a member, along with her husband Clint, is a member of our Young Farmers and Ranchers Committee, and a long resume of ag involvement, but I'll let you get more into that. But thank you so much for having us today, Raquel.
Well, thank y'all for coming. I call our little piece of heaven here Grand Central Station because we always have people in and out all the time, which anyone who farms probably can sympathize with that. So
I feel that. My mom used to laugh that she was going to put a Ring doorbell at the end of our driveway because so she could know when people were coming in and out.
Absolutely. You got to have your ears open for open gates and people coming down the driveway.
That's hilarious. And I probably should have said we're in your pasture, not your home. But we are right outside of your home. It's one and the same, of course.
Yeah, we have a beautiful 10-acre homestead where we finish our calves here, and then our bigger pastures are, as you can see from the camera cam, but just right on the other side of the tree line.
We are all in the thick of it. We are really in the element today. But why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I don't want to give your resume because it's quite lengthy and quite detailed, and you've been all over the place and done a lot of things. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you have ended up right here.
You know, I ask myself that question every day.
I know.
Well, I guess I'll start from the beginning if there is such a thing. But I'm originally from Baton Rouge, East Baton Rouge Parish. So very much, suburban, urban, subdivision life. I did not have a history of agriculture. Outside of, my grandparents probably would be the closest generation, where my grandfather worked. His dad was a manager on a plantation in Morganza. And that was kind of this quasi story, I guess you could say, but it wasn't something that we intimately felt close to. But my grandfather was a wonderful man who had, incredible stories of life growing up on a plantation. And working at a very young age. He was one of several children, over a dozen children, if I'm not mistaken. So we had these stories, and I think that that's something really cool about agriculture is that it doesn't take long before you find a story in a family. He was one of the children that moved to the big city to get, career opportunities and things like that after the service, and raised two children there. And I was raised in Baton Rouge as well. Grew up that way, never had an idea that I was going to become an agriculturalist. Matter of fact, my family are entrepreneurs and marketing, and I thought that I was just going to take a cushy PR job in the city, and at one of the many, agencies that are available there, and went to school for public relations. But while I was in high school, again, a very large public school, Woodlawn High, I had the opportunity to work with a young teacher who wanted to charter an FFA program, which I had only heard about in songs, oh, this is a real thing.
That's so funny.
Yeah, but it's true.
I've never thought about it that way, but it is a lot of songs.
It's in songs, it's in theory. I was that girl in high school that wanted to be as part of much thing as possible and take advantage of as many opportunities, which looking back on it was such a great thing to do because I didn't realize how many opportunities I had that most kids don't, just in a public school setting. So that individual, that teacher, ended up being Cade Lejeune, who
I did not know this story till the other day. If you're wondering who Cade Lejeune is, just go back
a few episodes
back. Carl interviewed him during National FFA Week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Cade was, if it wasn't his first year teaching, maybe it was his second. So early 20s, I was, 16 or 17, and that I knew everything. And I knew everybody about the school. So we kind of worked well together in that sense. And he was just if you've ever met Cade, he's diehard FFA, and his upbringing was from the beginning, almost more or less since, early high school, he knew that that's what he was going to do. And so, I like passionate people. And so, I had the opportunity to work with him and charter that chapter. We kind of stirred the pot a little bit. We were on the bunch of city kids where we placed at the state livestock competition our first year. Yeah, that was an experience. No regrets. I still have the pin. That was back when they would give pins. Again, anybody who knows me. I'm pretty competitive.
We were just discussing that off camera.
So this was right up my alley. That it was a perfect combination between professionalism and communications, which this was before ag communications was really a thing, right?
Okay.
That was my SAE, was ag communications before it was a thing. And agriculture, but I always say I fell in love with the culture of agriculture first, because I can't say I grew up on a farm or with animals or showing livestock or what have you. So I fell in love with the culture and, frankly, the morals and values that agriculture teaches that you get taught in the FFA, or I was anyway.
Right.
And so I appreciated the competition aspect, and I was taught so many values that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. Fast forward into college, I thought that I had kind of left that part of my life behind because it just wasn't, it was a great experience to develop the communication side of what I wanted to pursue. And I just didn't see a path forward in agriculture with the resources that my available to me. But my freshman year at the University of Louisiana Lafayette, I always say I met a man with a thick beard and a thick accent.
I was wondering where I came into this story.
So it didn't take long before I found one of those. Of course, Lafayette was such a small town to me, though. Like, I didn't realize moving there that was the big city for a lot of people that go to UL, or at the time it was. So that was a experience, a culture shock in itself. And I was like, y'all are worried about the traffic? Like, what traffic?
Have y'all been over the bridge?
Yeah, exactly. So, like I said, I met Clint my freshman year, first semester, and we met in the library. I mean, just so cliche. But he starts telling me, we get to talking, we can, close our textbooks. Well, I closed my textbook. Let's be clear. Anybody who knows Clint knows he didn't close his. But, we just started talking, and he starts telling me about this life that he's lived. First time we've met, of course, in this community called Fobo. And he grew up with horses, cows, and I know about cows. So
I was an FFA once.
I was an FFA, and he's like, really? I was like, yeah.
This isn't adding up.
Yeah. And so we had a lot to talk about, but not just the livestock aspect and the agriculture aspect, but he grew up with these values and experiences, this network of people and culture that I had read about, right? Like, again, true Cajun country, but and I knew that my family had not been that removed from, but something that I had already aspired for, but just didn't think it was going to be something that I could achieve. The joke is, of course, that now Clint will never admit this, but I'll tell just because it's just you and me.
Nobody else is watching. This is not on the record.
I went back to my dorm, and I was like, well, that's how you meet the man you're going to marry. Like, I knew we were going to, do the happily ever after thing, which is so cheesy, but it's true. And then we lived life, and fast forward at that point. I graduated in 3.5 years, with my public relations degree in business. He graduated a couple years in, he was already a few years in engineering. And we said we were going to go back, and whatever it took, we were going to, take the jobs that it took and do whatever it took to build a family around agriculture. And that's what we did. So now we're here. And it happened very quickly. So from that day, 3 years almost exactly to that day, we got married. And within the first year of our marriage, we started our farm. We bought the farm. Got pregnant, bought our homestead.
With no wasted time.
Yeah, I'm not saying this was all planned, but it happened very quickly. In our first year, we started our farm, bought our cattle, bought our homestead. We started renting the property that we originally purchased. We gutted that home. Like, it was just a lot. And then so we did fast forward, and we've been very happy ever since, obviously. Professionally, at that point, I was also, in that first year, I was also given the opportunity to be the CEO of St. Landry Parish Chamber of Commerce.
Oh, awesome.
So,
I didn't even know this part of your resume.
Yeah, so my first big girl job after graduating, more or less, I worked for a local radio station, which was my thing. Like, my parents had worked in radio for years, so that was like...
See, also didn't know that. You learn something new every podcast.
So I grew up working in radio, basically.
Oh, that's so cool.
Like when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of a natural fit for me. And then I was given, part of the job was to be a liaison to the Chamber of Commerce in St. Landry. So when that job became available, I was only 22. And
You've lived a lot of life at this point.
Yeah, I lived a lot of life, but I think I was only 22. And I was the youngest CEO like ever in Louisiana Chambers of Commerce, which was wild. But we grew that organization incredible, like financially and membership wise. We just grew the organization. We became, within my first 5 years, within the first 3 years, we became Chamber of the Year for the state of Louisiana. We met our 100-year anniversary.
That's awesome.
And it was an incredible experience. And again, I got to, St. Landry is such an agriculturally rich community. And it's not, I mean, it's very large as well. So it's not far from where I live. So I got to get even more in touch with the agricultural community there, because ag is so important to St. Landry Parish. It's the equine capital of the parish, of the state. And, yam country and all of that. So I was like, and I have a farm. And, so I got to really mesh the best of both worlds. I got to mesh my ag background in life with the executive side of my background. So I did that for several years, maybe 6 or 7. And then I was given the opportunity to move to the FFA. So
full circle moment there.
Yeah. I got a call from this ag teacher that I knew.
Goes back to Cade.
Yeah, it goes back to Cade. Got a call from an ag teacher who now had become the executive vice secretary, maybe. But the number 2 for the state, for the Louisiana FFA. And he was doing all things chapter-based, right? He was running the convention. He was managing chapters, that kind of thing. And he knew that the foundation, as a nonprofit, needed someone who had experience managing organizations. So at this point, I was pregnant with my second, and I told him that. But he said it was worth the interview. So I was kind of at that point where I was looking at what are my state opportunities without leaving the farm, because we had a thriving. This was during COVID too, or right after COVID. So we had a thriving direct-to-consumer beef operation at this point that was doing really, really well. We had expanded the homestead to other projects, and I wanted to be home for that. And so I didn't know how I was going to take a Baton Rouge job and do both. But God took care of me again. I got the best of both worlds again. So I was at the FFA for a couple of years, and was able to grow that organization financially significantly. And earlier, maybe a year ago now, I guess it was, I kind of had gotten to that point where we had grown our operation so much that it didn't really make sense for me to kind of split my time. So I'm able to stay home and work full time on the operation, and then any free time that I have, which is limited, I'm able to give back to community organizations and state organizations like Farm Bureau.
Yeah, and you've put a lot of time in that, for sure.
That is a very long introduction.
That is not. That is exactly what we're here to. That is awesome. I learned so much from that. And ironically, I think at some point in this, we said there weren't really that was before ag communications were a thing. You had quite the ag communication resume for that not being for it not being a thing.
Yeah.
So let's kind of talk a little bit about Clint, because you talk about how y'all have a thriving farm operation here, but Clint is still working a full-time 9 to 5. Is that correct?
I think that we make up the majority of agriculturalists or producers, especially livestock producers in Louisiana, when at least one of us, or for most of our career at ag, both of us have worked full-time jobs. And he's worked a full-time 40-plus hour a week job as an engineer since we started. Now, fortunately, again, living in a small town and taking the engineering jobs in a small town, he doesn't live far. He doesn't work far, I should say. He doesn't live far from his job. He's 10 minutes away. So when the cows do get out every once in a while,
that is a real thing.
That it happens. It never ceases to amaze me. But you know what? Since I've been home, I've gotten the cows every time.
Hey, there you go.
I mean, I know I don't look at today, but if these cows got out, we would be set. We'd be okay.
See, women in ag, they're a special breed.
And I'm so proud of again, as much as I loved the culture of agriculture, that makes me and I have to complain about it. I have to tell Clint, I had to let your cows back in.
I think that's like a rite of passage. Sometimes I'm like, we love it. We love it so much. We have to complain about it a little bit so people don't know how good it is.
Exactly. Absolutely. So I fuss Clint a little bit and I say, oh, I had to let your cows back in or whatever. He's like, did you let him out? I'm like, maybe.
He has to know where his bread is buttered or his beef is beefed up, right?
Absolutely. So yeah, Clint works full time, and we've just been very fortunate to have opportunities that are close to the farm. But we're very much a working to farm family. All of our spare time goes to that. We don't really take vacations unless it's with Farm Bureau, and it's not really vacations.
It's work.
But the thing about Clint, and it's his engineering personality, is that, and I'm the same way too, and I think it goes back to me being, strategic and business focused, is we do everything like strategically.
There's always a goal.
Yeah, and there's always a big why.
Yeah.
And Allie, our big why is to get our kids to heaven and to get each other to heaven. Like at the end of the day, we just so happen to think that agriculture is a really solid route to take to do that. And so, yeah, we have to put food on the table and put food on other people's tables. But that's our big why. And, especially on hard years that maybe we don't do as well, or we're not able to complete all of the projects on the farm that we wanted to get done, we ask ourselves, okay, but did we get closer to our big why? And that typically makes us sleep at night a little bit better.
I think that's so important. And I think a lot of people in ag would probably agree with that. It's not easy. We were just joking about complaining about it, but it is hard. There's tough times. There's no constants. It's all unpredictable and it's out of our hands, but there's a greater lifestyle in it. But I kind of wanted to talk about why, because I think this why is important, because sometimes in Farm Bureau, we kind of are like, why? It's volunteering. It's time. It's a volunteer position. It takes time. It takes energy. So why, especially as somebody, obviously you didn't come up in ag, so you're not a generational Farm Bureau member, which is a case for a lot of our members. Can you kind of talk about your Farm Bureau story and how you ended up involved in that organization and why you and Clint continue to dedicate time away from your family and away from your farm to that organization?
Yeah, so we were Farm Bureau members from the start. Unfortunately, we weren't as involved from the start as we are now. And I only say unfortunately because every second that we have invested in this organization, we have been given back in one way or the other, multiple times over. So, yeah, we were members of the Farm Bureau Federation because that's Clint's family had always been. But we just kind of were inactive members, which would probably be a majority of people and producers. That was a mistake. That was early. We were running and gunning, though. We were a little busy. I don't know if we would have been able to had we known the opportunities. And we had been involved in other professional organizations too, but nothing compared to the quality of professional development that this organization, YF&R and Farm Bureau Federation, has provided could compare. So I'm trying to think of which came first, the chicken or the egg kind of a thing. Probably started with either Robert Duncan or Richard Fontenot, or maybe both at the same time.
Two very familiar names.
Yeah. One of the two. So
we won't tell whichever one you give credit.
Again, this is just between you and me.
We'll see which one's listening.
Yeah, but I was obviously more in the circle with my position in the FFA. We had gone to different meetings and things like that, but just didn't have the time to dedicate to something else. And probably as I was in more circles around the FFA, I realized that we were missing out on some serious opportunities for professional development, for personal development, for just networking and knowledge. Like, even if you don't dive head first, the most tangible things that we've gotten is from conversations like this, where it's like, oh, you didn't know that there's this program, or do y'all file this form this way? Little things that Clint's like, I've been doing this my whole life, and I didn't know that was an opportunity that we could be having. So, on top of that, so I guess Robert was probably more the, hey, as a family, this, because he's so family oriented, he's a wonderful man, family oriented, this is something that could benefit your family. And then Richard knew me more from the FFA background, and he is a neighbor. He doesn't live far, so he knew my family at this point. And so he was like, hey, I want you to get into the competition aspect, knowing that I'm relatively competitive. And of course,
relative. I feel like you're very competitive. We've hinted on it a few times, and it's a common theme here.
You could ask Richard Fontenot. I remember when he asked me the first time, and I laughed. because I was like, that's so embarrassing. I said I would never, I'm like nearly, X years old. I said, I'm way too old to compete in things. I said, I haven't competed since I kicked everybody's butt at state livestock show. No. So I said, no, I could never do that, I don't have anything to prove, whatever it might be. And he was like, I know, but I really want, he's from Evangeline Parish. This is before he was the president. And he was like, I really want somebody to represent my parish, and I want you to do it. Well, it's like at this point now, it's like, who you going to say no to Richard Fontenot? So that got me into the competition side of YF&R. When I said yes to discussion meet, well, then he ran with that. And then it was like, well, you got to be on the state committee for YF&R to represent District 5. There was a vacancy for that year. So in our first year, I competed at discussion meet. I won, which was unexpected.
Hey.
And then in that same year, we started our first term. Me and Clint started our first term as district directors for YF&R.
I really jumped in.
Yeah, but it's kind of a common theme.
I'm saying that competitive and
we
fast
don't do slow or without intent. We go fast and full of intention. But again, we've looked at it every time something comes up. And again, at first, maybe it was just we're going to sit on this committee, but this committee presents opportunities. And so every time an opportunity is presented within Farm Bureau, we look at it and we have an important conversation as spouses and partners. And we say, okay, is this worth our time? For example, is going to Baton Rouge, to the Capitol, is to advocate for agriculture, is that worth our time? Is it worth my time? And it's proven it has been. I mean, we see the dividends from it for our family, for our community, and that's
for the people that are not there.
And that's the other thing. So one of what's equally as fulfilling as, let's say, going to Washington, D.C. and interacting with people that are who have the power to make a difference for communities like Evangeline Parish, as rewarding as that is, in the same month, I got in a truck with a man who sells registered Brangus or registered Angus bulls to buy a new bull. And I'm talking to him about how we're about to go to DC. And he's telling me, this 80-year-old farmer is telling me how grateful he is that I'm going because he can't.
And that's huge.
I just got goosebumps. But that to me is where it all comes together. Like, why was I given this opportunity? I know this sounds mushy, but why was I given this opportunity to use communication skills for ag when I was 15, if it wasn't for that? Because I know that whether it be time commitment or just personal ability or what have you.
Comfort zone. Not everybody can go to the Capitol and talk to legislators.
And again, I said that from the beginning. I took for granted that I had these opportunities when I was younger. And I don't anymore because I realize that there are people who won't be able to do those things. So that's why we always look and evaluate and say, are we helping ourselves in our big why? Are we also helping our community? And so whether that's going to our police jury and visiting and fussing maybe even a little bit, or going, I represent Farm Bureau actually on our Parish Economic Development Authority as well. Farm Bureau, through our advocacy efforts, Farm Bureau, and through great representation like Rhonda Butler, Farm Bureau has a standing seat on our Parish Economic Development Authority.
Well, that talks to the grassroots.
Our parish seats and our parish offices are making huge differences for the people that live here in all of the parishes across the state.
Yeah, so whether it's at the nation's capital or our parish capital, our parish seat, we see the work, and we're happy to do the work because we see the fruit of that work.
I know a lot of people are thankful for that, for sure, and it is a time commitment, and it's a huge time commitment, and we don't take that for granted, and I know so many people are appreciative. We often say, if you farm and are not a Farm Bureau member, you still benefit from Farm Bureau.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
You're helping. Let's talk a little bit about the opportunities. You kind of touched on YF&R and a few of the opportunities. Since you have Clint have been on the board, what are some of the things that y'all have gotten to do? What does that position look like? What are the things you've got to do since you jumped in head first those 2 years ago?
Let's reiterate that you don't have to do all the things.
I think that's important, though. I do think that's very important
to mention that, you're going to hear the list and you're going to be like, I know that I do not want to do YF&R if I have to do all of these things. That this is not mandatory. This is something that we have evaluated for our family. But yeah, it started, of course, with state convention. You go to state convention, you represent your district We've sat as voting delegates and alternates at state convention. So that's, something, I mean, it's essential to the grassroots effort. Of course, we also sit on our parish Farm Bureau board. So we sit on those are monthly meetings where we get to tell both sides, right? We get to be here's what's going on at the state level, but also here's what's going on locally. So I guess that's base level. Minimum.
That is the entry point.
That's entry point. So local meetings and then state convention, we have a role there. Once you get on committee at YF&R, there's a little bit more responsibility associated with convention. You don't have to compete in things, but a lot of committee members like to compete in things, but you don't have to be a committee member to compete in things.
Unless Mr. Richard asks.
Unless the president tells you to, and then you have to. So yeah, at this parish level, I represented our parish for discussion meet. We won that. So then one of the prizes for winning discussion meet is to go to American Farm Bureau and represent the state of Louisiana, which I feel passionate about. Representing the state. I love my state. I love our state for its agricultural attributes, but for so much for its historical attributes. So we did that in Salt Lake City. That was a week in Salt Lake City. We competed in that. That was an incredible experience for so many reasons. Learned so much. And then, so we came back from that. The next trip was DC. So I went by myself. Clint came with me to Salt Lake City, but I went by myself to DC for the first time. And that's pure advocacy. That's working the whole time. We visit with representatives. We talk about issues. If you're a nerd like me, you read the policy book like cover to cover. And then you talk about what Farm Bureau policy with these leaders. And how their policy aligns.
Andy Brown would be so proud right now.
Well, he's gotten a week of it just recently, so he's probably not. He's tired of hearing it. But so went to DC. I love policy and politics in any instance. So that's for me is awesome. And then in the early spring, around this time every year, there's either the YF&R AFBF conference or the Fusion conference. Last year we did the YF&R conference that was in Nebraska, Omaha. So me, Clint, and our children, our two boys.
It's a big Farm Bureau family.
It was, and I think it was an unspoken initiative that all of the YF&R people, we probably shouldn't advertise that, but we took care of we trust each other. We love each other. It is a family. The YF&R people, we're all going through the same things, even if it's different scales. Don't get me wrong. Again, we're not fully invested the way that, a crawfish or rice farmer might be in a drought year. We were with them for that. And we were there to support them and if nothing else, just be somebody to talk to and advocate for. Again, if they can't leave their farms because they're dealing with a drought, we can, and we're going to support them in that way. So we did Nebraska, and then the year kind of slows down just for a second until we get to the next convention. At the next convention, I was asked to complete in Excellence in Ag, which is, of course, for individuals who do not make a majority of their income from agriculture production. At the time, I didn't, so I was still with the FFA. So I applied for that. That's more of a written application as well as a presentation. But this time, I really wanted to do it with Clint because he's my partner, and that was the only downside to discussion meet is I couldn't do it with him. So me and Clint did Excellence in Ag together. We won.
A competitive spirit. It's addictive.
I don't know. I almost,
listening to you talk today, I can understand.
You see it now.
I understand all of it.
But the great thing about Excellence in Agriculture is not about so discussion meet, it's how much you've studied and how much you know and how much you can articulate. Excellence in Ag, it's really just telling your story. And if they like your story, you're good.
Well, you're good at both of those things.
Well, so thank you. But so we just told our story and we won. And so that was last summer. And then we went and did it all over again.
We're about to start diffusion. Aren't you flying out tomorrow?
Yes.
Well, at this area, you'll be there.
So we did Excellence in Agriculture this year. It was where were we? San Antonio?
It feels like a lifetime ago.
We were in San Antonio. It was a week in San Antonio. Again, same thing, lots of education, an incredible experience. I'm so proud of our state. We have, and this isn't also I know that we're a lot. It's important to mention, I know that we're a lot and that not everybody can have the time to dedicate to this. We wouldn't either if it wasn't for you guys and the staff and the support, even if that support is me calling and being like, am I okay? Like, am I thinking about this the right way? The support that Megan and the communication staff has given me personally and our family, and Nikki and Raquel, who's oddly enough, our field service agent, like that team of people, I feel like are our family because they care. And I don't think they just care because it's their job. I think they care because they care. So
I think it goes back to that culture of
absolutely. And these aren't people who took the job because they're like, oh, this sounds like a good job. These are people who are rooted in the industry, and this is the way they give back too. So, I sympathize with that in itself. So yeah, we do all the things, but we wouldn't be able to do it without you guys.
Y'all are like the poster child of like, these are all the things that you can do. But again, I think it's so important that you mentioned there's a place for everybody, even if you don't have that time. Even if you just have time to stop by your parish meeting, it's still important. And it's
and
that's so vital.
We're seeing a little bit of that now, and I'm not taking credit for that at all, but we're seeing, I think what's honestly happening.
I'll give you a little bit of credit.
No, I don't think so. We're seeing in the last 2 years more what they would consider young farmers and ranchers coming into our parish meeting. I don't think it's because they're like, oh, look at what Raquel's doing. I think it's because the senior leaders are seeing what we're doing in that meeting, and they're like, man, my nephew could do that. And I'm like, yeah, your nephew can. Like,
he should get him.
So, and we've seen that. We've seen a handful of young professionals coming in to our parish meeting, and I hope that that's happening throughout the state. I'd like to see it in between the convention, our state convention, and the AFBF convention. I was appointed to represent the district in our Ag in the Classroom committee, which I love on a personal note. I mean, I have young children, so I love going to my kids' school and reading and sharing that. Now, in my kids' school is a lot of ag kids, so it's not the hard work.
It's still important though. You'd be surprised.
Yeah, but
people are getting farther and farther removed, even in these ag communities.
You're right. So I'm trying to do that a little bit more in the other schools in our community. But so I got involved in Ag in the Classroom. It's my first year with that. So we competed at AFBF. We just got back from DC, which was an incredible trip. Clint got to come with me this time, which was even better. And then we're flying out tomorrow for Fusion. But we're not bringing the kids this time. Well, we're bringing one.
So we mentioned you're also running a farming operation in the middle of all of that. And Clint's working and also a full-time job.
So, like I said, it made sense at some point in all of this. It kind of made sense for me to spend more time at home.
And I don't think you're spending it at home. I just think you're spending it differently.
It's not here nor there, Allie. No. I think, I mean, I don't think I have a gap in my resume. That's for sure. I think that the work that we're doing is going to be fruitful in more than one way.
I think that's so important. We kind of talked about a lot. Let's just say if you had to pick your favorite aspect of YF&R or Farm Bureau in general, what comes to mind when you think about if you had 30 seconds to tell somebody the best thing of your Farm Bureau experience so far?
The best thing, I think for me, and it kind of circles back, is that, and I don't know if this is like a term used in agriculture, but because I wasn't born into it, I have terrible imposter syndrome. Okay. So I know that maybe that doesn't come off this way, but especially in the beginning, I struggled to know if I was doing what I was good at and it just so happened to be in the agricultural space, or if I was actually a contributing member to the industry. And Farm Bureau has taught me that I'm contributing and that it's making a difference and that they need me, or people like me would be a better, women like me. If we're talking about women, they need women like me to be able to do other things too. And in that time, as time has gone by, I've been able to catch cows more and do things that actually give me confidence, because me going win awards, that doesn't actually give me any confidence, just so you know.
Well, that's what comes natural to you, and not the awards. I'm not saying that to be, but the communications part and the competitive part was the natural part.
That I'm very grateful for it, but it's not something that I need to build myself up, if that makes sense. Me actually, for example, diversifying my farm and starting a pumpkin patch last year, doing it myself, that was something that I needed, that I didn't know that I needed to build myself and build my farm. I mean, it was a profitable endeavor. I diversified my farm. It was a grassroots effort, quite literally. I would not have had the inspiration to do it had it not been for YF&R.
I think that's so important. I think just you talking about, I had the communications, but not the ag. And a lot of times it's the opposite. We have our farmers and ranchers that are full-time, and they are full-time farmers and that's their primary source in their row crop or their crawfish, and they can't leave the land as much necessarily. And I think it's so important that we have a combination of all the things, because it takes all kinds and everybody working together. It's such a small percentage of the population these days that it takes absolutely everyone working together and using their strengths to get where we got to go.
And I'm all for sustaining and keeping up those generations of farmers who have put 5 generations into the land, and propping them and doing whatever I can to keep them going. On the end, as well as looking at, like I said, the FFA, not all of those kids are producers. Most of them aren't. So if I can give them an example, even especially the women, going back to women, most of the leadership in the Louisiana FFA in terms of student leadership are female. So if I can show them different routes where they can still physically work in the field, and also give back to the industry in ways that they've strengthened themselves to do, just by setting an example, that I'm doing something right.
I think that's so important. And I kind of want to talk a little bit about the women aspect. It's Women's History Month. That's why we're making sure all of our guests are females, and Carl let me take over for the month.
Which I love this, by the way.
I think it's important to talk about. We kind of have it hinted. You have a third child on the way, and we don't know if it's a boy or a girl. If you are having a daughter, if it is a little girl in there, what do you want her to know about being a woman in this industry that sometimes it's not always not the nicest, because I think it is. And I think we are so lucky that in today's age that you can do as much as you want to do. But what would you tell her, or just a woman in looking to find her foot in the door?
I think it's hilarious that we're soft launching Louise Manuel right here. But
I'm manifesting. Hey, I am next to you. We only have girls, so I might be rubbing off on you.
I wouldn't be surprised at this point. But I can say that I feel very privileged to be a woman in Louisiana agriculture, without a doubt. I've always felt privileged. And I've also can say that I've never felt, I guess, intentionally discouraged working in this industry. I felt overwhelming support. Now, I can't say that. I do not speak for every woman in Louisiana agriculture. I can just say that for me, and again, maybe it's just blind naivety, but that's how I feel. If I do have a daughter, I would like to think that if I'm in this situation and I look out into the future, first of all, the future looks very bright to me, for women especially, but for agriculturalists and people who want to contribute to our country in that way. I'll actually go ahead and say that I feel even more comfortable if I have a daughter, both for logistically speaking, there are resources available for women in ag. If I'm being, just pure black and white on documentation, there are opportunities to be had, just in that. But also, I feel like I've set an example for this child that whether it be a boy or a girl, that you can succeed in whatever you do as long as you do it with the right intention. And I think that's really good to have good intentions, or easy, I should say, to have good intentions in agriculture. So if we do our job right, here in the now in advocacy, but also more importantly as parents, Louise is not going to have an issue in whatever she wants to do. And I know that she will always have that tie that might bring her into the industry.
And I think even if it's not sweet little Louise, all of the future women in agriculture are going to benefit from the work that you're doing and from that. And as somebody who was raised on a farm, my poor dad only had 3 girls and a boy wasn't in the cards, but I think the values, while we didn't stay back on the farm, we're still working in the industry, we still appreciate it. And I think the values that are learned there are so important, regardless of what your children, female or male, want to do.
And everywhere I look, I'm sure you could probably sympathize with that. Everywhere that I look, I see strong, powerful women who understand that their role can be diverse. And again, my primary role is here and it's taking care of my family, but God has given us all gifts. And I think that as long as I'm prioritizing my family first, opportunities to use that gifts will come. And this is where it is right now. But everywhere I look in the Farm Bureau Federation, I see strong women supported by stronger men, frankly, that have allowed, and these women have paved the way for you and I. And I know, again, that sounds cliche, but we're going to see Temple Grandin in Fusion. She's doing one of the breakout sessions or keynotes. And that's a great example of someone I've never got to hear speak before that did not fit a certain mold as a woman in her, her era and her time, much less her industry. and she has gone on to truly and literally impact the entire world. So I think that these are people that are doing way better job than I am.
It takes all, and I think it goes back to those grassroots levels. It takes impacts on all levels, and we've got to start somewhere. And I think making an impact at your home and on your parish level, as well as the national capital and around the world, is so important. And it's been such an awesome time visiting with you, Raquel. I've learned so much about you and just about your journey, and I think it's encouraging to somebody who may not be in the industry or in Farm Bureau to know that there's still a seat at the table for them. And I appreciate you bringing that perspective.
Again, thank you for coming to my little piece of paradise right here and hearing our story. And I hope it inspires, well, first of all, you too, because I think that you've had not an entirely dissimilar journey. And you probably have those opportunities of being like, no, wait, I'm actually making a difference and it's not just a job. So thank you for what you do.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. But I'm very lucky to work with volunteers like you and to get to do this job every day. So thank you. We've talked about a lot of things today, and we're going to be sure to include all of the links for our YF&R, those conferences that we mentioned, and all the opportunities that Raquel mentioned today. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Louisiana Farm Bureau Podcast.